Hey guys, tonight we slip back into a time when the world was darker than anything you've ever known. No street lamps, no glowing screens, no friendly porch lights to guide you home. Just the raw, suffocating blackness of night, thicker than velvet, heavier than a blanket, and you're standing right in the middle of it. You reach your hand out in front of your face, and you can't even see your fingers. You can only feel the damp air brushing against your skin and hear the rustle of something. Was that wind through grass or something creeping closer? Without fire, you're in a world where night doesn't just mean bedtime, it means survival. Or possibly not. And honestly, you probably wouldn't last till dawn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, before we go deeper into this shadowy journey, drop your location and the time you're watching in the comments. I love seeing the little constellation of where you all are in the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through this endless prehistoric night. Your bare feet pressing into cool soil. The air feels alive. Every whisper of grass, every snap of a twig, sending a jolt through your nerves. Your body's natural instinct is to look for light. But there is none, not a candle, not a torch, not even the glow of fireflies in this part of the world tonight. You suddenly realize how dependent you are on your eyes during the day and how useless they become now. Instead, your ears take over. You hear an owl screech in the distance, its call slicing through the silence. That sound might comfort you today because you know it's just an owl, but in this time, in this pitch black world, it's a reminder that predators rule the dark. You can't tell if the growl you thought you heard was imagination, or if something with teeth is lurking. Historians still argue whether early humans were fully nocturnal survivors or more, like fragile day walkers, cowering when the sun dipped. But here's the truth that anthropologists do agree on. Before fire, nights were long, terrifying, and punishing. You didn't stretch out for 8 hours of beauty sleep. You stayed alert, twitching awake at every sound, trying to balance exhaustion with the fear that you'd become some saber-toothed tiger's midnight snack. And the thing about this darkness is it's not just inconvenient. It reshapes your mind. Without light, the human imagination starts working overtime. Shapes move where there are none. The sound of a stick breaking feels like a whole army of predators. In modern times, you call this paranoia. Back then, it was called staying alive. Imagine yourself pressed against the base of a tree trunk, hugging your knees. You've stuffed dry leaves under your body to stay off the cold earth. Your skin prickles with goosebumps. Your stomach clenches because dinner wasn't guaranteed. And your brain keeps drifting between sleep and hyper-alertness. You doze for a few minutes, then snap awake with your heart racing. You're tired, but can you really risk falling into deep sleep? Here's a quirky tidbit. There's evidence. Some groups of early humans may have actually used caves not primarily as homes, but as nighttime hideouts. Picture a bunch of people squatting in a cramped, damp space pressed against rock walls. Not because it was cozy, but because a single narrow entrance was easier to defend from whatever might crawl in. You can almost smell the musty air, hear the drip of water echoing in the cavern, and feel that damp chill sticking to your skin. Not exactly a 5-star hotel. And yet, without fire, this was the best option. The night was a predator's playground. Lions, leopards, hyenas they hunted with night vision you couldn't dream of. Meanwhile, you're blind, slow, and frankly, Delicious. Now here's the cheeky reality check. Without fire, you'd probably be the midnight snack, not the survivor telling the story. You think it's hard falling asleep without scrolling on your phone? Try it when you're worried that the growl outside. The cave belongs to something considering you as the main course. Still, there's something oddly beautiful in this nightmare. Look up. You'd see stars like you've never seen before. A river of light across the sky, sharp enough to make you dizzy. Without light pollution, the Milky Way is so bright, you could almost walk by it. The moon becomes your clock, your lantern, and your comfort. And if you're lucky enough to have a full moon, maybe you'll dare to venture a few steps from the cave. If not, you're staying put, clinging to the hope of sunrise. You shift, trying to find warmth. Your body's CRAVs sleep, but the fear of the dark keeps you from sinking into it fully. Scientists believe that before fire, humans probably had segmented sleep nodding off in short bursts, then waking to check for danger. And honestly, you can feel that right now. Your eyelids flutter shut. Your body jerks awake. Your heart hammers. Then the cycle repeats. It's restless, uncomfortable, and unending. Every shadow becomes a monster. Every rustle is a threat. And the sad truth is, sometimes it really is. You pull your knees tighter, wondering if the others in your little band are still awake. Maybe someone is keeping watch, maybe not. Either way, you know this. Night is not your friend. It's a test you must endure, hour after hour, until the sky finally softens from black to gray, and the first rays of dawn spill across the land. Only then can you breathe again, knowing you've survived another fireless night. But for now, you just sit, trembling in the dark, waiting for morning to save you. You're still sitting there in that heavy darkness. But gradually, you start to notice something above your head. No, it's not fire. Not the warm glow of a camp flame. You don't have that luxury yet. Instead, your ceiling is the sky itself, and it is alive. The moon has climbed higher. A pale silver coin that splashes its light unevenly over the land. You squint, letting your eyes adjust. And suddenly, the world doesn't feel quite so invisible anymore. The outlines of trees emerge, shadows stretch long, and that big glowing orb becomes your only real companion through the night. The moon is your flashlight, though not a reliable one. Some nights, it's full, fat, and almost arrogant in the way it brightens the path before you. Other nights, it disappears completely, leaving only starlight to drip down like frost. And that's when you feel the difference between being brave and being foolish. Under a full moon, you might risk sneaking to the river for water or scavenging for food. Under a new moon, forget it. You hunker down, listening, waiting, praying nothing with claws catches your scent. Mainstream historians agree that early humans used the moon as a kind of natural clock. The phases weren't just pretty, they dictated activity. Travel was safer on full moons. Hunting was possible. Migrations were timed by this silver guide. But here's the quirky little fact. Some anthropologists argue humans may have developed a kind of lunar insomnia. Basically, during brighter nights, people slept less because their brains were overstimulated by the light. Historians still argue whether this was adaptive or just annoying. But you know what? If you've ever struggled to sleep when your neighbor left their porch light on, imagine that, but celestial and unavoidable. Now, shift your gaze slightly, and the stars begin to pop. You blink once, twice, and then there it is, a galaxy smeared across the sky like spilled milk. Billions of stars, sharper than pinpricks, each one steady and unwavering. Today, you're lucky if you can see 20 from your backyard. Back then, you'd see everything. Think about it. No smog. No glowing cities. No billboards screaming in neon. Just endless black canvas filled with light. And here's the kicker, those stars weren't just decoration. To you, they're maps, calendars, and maybe even gods. Without fire to distract you, you stare at them for hours. You trace patterns, connect dots, invent shapes. Over time, these become constellations, and constellations become stories. Your ancestors didn't just make up bedtime tales. They wrote them into the very fabric of the night sky. You probably chuckle now, thinking of someone lying flat on their back, whispering, "That cluster there? That's a giant hunter chasing a bull forever." Silly, maybe, but isn't it exactly what you'd do if you had no Netflix? No podcasts, no glow of your phone. Stars were the first big screen entertainment system without commercials, without buffering. And honestly, they were much more reliable. Of course, the stars weren't just for fun. They gave you bearings. You could follow them to water, to safer hunting grounds, or away from rival tribes. They were your ancient GPS, long before satellites cluttered the sky. Historians still argue whether people in the pre-fire age had the same detailed sky maps as later civilizations. But the evidence leans toward yes. Some groups seem to know the night sky as intimately as you know the layout of your own house. And let's be real, when the stars are your only guide, you have to memorize them. But here's the funny twist. As much as you rely on these cosmic lanterns, they also mess with you. Ever heard of the man in the moon? That face people imagine staring back from lunar craters. Well, picture an early human staring. So long, they actually believe there's a being up there watching them. Some tribes probably prayed to it. Others feared it. And without fire to keep the mind grounded, imagination runs wild. You might even start whispering to the moon, asking it to protect you through the night. Kind of like texting your friend for comfort. Except your friend is a glowing rock, 240,000 miles away. Now, here's your little sarcastic nudge. You complain when your phone flashlight dies. But these people, they crossed rivers and hunted game guided only by moonlight. That glowing crescent was their survival app, their mood lamp, and their nightlight all in one. And when it vanished, well, too bad. No upgrades, no battery packs, no, just charge it. Still, there's something breathtaking about this arrangement. Without fire, you're forced into a direct relationship with the sky. Every night, you look up and the heavens look back. You measure your tiny existence against infinite space. You sleep under stars so bright they could almost cast shadows. And you realize how small you are, but also how deeply connected. It's humbling. It's terrifying. And if you let yourself relax just a little, it's also strangely comforting. The moon and stars fade a little as clouds roll in. And suddenly, you're reminded of how fragile this nightly guidance really is. Without fire, your body CRAV's protection from more than just the dark, it's CRAV's warmth. A roof of some kind, anything to keep out the bite of the night air. So, you shuffle toward the nearest rocky outcrop, a shallow cave whose jagged mouth yawns like the entrance to another world. You duck inside, the ground cold and damp beneath your bare feet, and you press your back against the wall, hoping the stone feels less hostile than the world outside. Shelter is everything. Without it, you're a sitting duck. Wind slices through you, rain soaks your skin, and if it's winter, you're in serious trouble. Modern, you might throw on a puffy jacket or crank up a heater, but prehistoric, all you've got are animal skins. maybe a few woven grasses, and the stubborn will to survive. You huddle deeper, pulling your knees close, making yourself as small as possible. Every breath steams into the air. White and fleeting, historians agree that caves were prime. Real estate long before anyone drew bison on their walls. They offered protection not just from weather, but from predators too. But here's the quirky twist. Caves weren't always cozy havens. They could just as easily be occupied sometimes by bears, sometimes by rival humans who didn't exactly leave a welcome mat out front. You think Airbnb is competitive? Try showing up at a cave already filled with a hibernating cave bear. Spoiler, you're not getting the deposit back. So, not every group lived in caves. Many made do with makeshift shelters, lean-tos of branches, or pits dug into the earth and covered with reeds. Imagine crawling into a hole just big enough for your body, wrapping yourself in furs, and hoping you'd wake up in the morning instead of being a midnight snack. Historians still argue whether these primitive shelters were common or rare, but the evidence shows both caves and temporary huts played major roles in survival. Now, think about the cold. You know that feeling when your toes go numb in winter? Multiply that by 1,000. No heaters, no socks fresh from the dryer, no hot cocoa. Just bone-deep chill that creeps into your muscles and refuses to let go. Early humans had two strategies: layering themselves, with animal hides or clustering together in tight groups. You might laugh at the idea of a prehistoric slumber party, but trust me, when the temperature drops below freezing, personal space goes out the window. And yet, without fire, warmth is relative. You never really get cozy. You don't sprawl luxuriously like you would under a blanket today. Instead, you sleep curled tight, conserving every drop of body heat, waking often to shiver, stretch, or shift. It's not rest, it's survival on pause. Your dreams are shallow, fragile, interrupted by the gnawing bite of cold air. Of course, there are always surprises. Archaeologists once discovered ancient shelters, reinforced with mammoth bones' massive frameworks, draped in hides that created something closer to an insulated hut. Picture it, a prehistoric igloo, minus the ice. Quirky, right? Using the skeleton of a giant animal as your bedroom walls. You could almost call it extreme recycling. But even with ingenuity, nighttime is still punishing. The cave echoes with drips of water. The wind howls through gaps in your shelter. Every creak sounds suspicious. Your brain stays on high alert because, unlike now, you can't rely on a lock, a thermostat, or even a flashlight. You have only your senses and your makeshift walls. Here's your cheeky reality. Check. You complained today when your blanket slips off in the middle of the night. Back then, that little inconvenience might have meant frostbite. Without fire, cozy wasn't in your vocabulary. Barely surviving was more like it. Still, there's something almost admirable about it. You, pressed against cold stone, listening to the night outside storms. Winds, maybe the distant growl of a lion. You aren't comfortable, but you are alive. And that, in this fireless age, is more than enough. You're curled up in that cold shelter, and the night outside is far from silent. Your ears twitch at every sound: crunching leaves, snapping twigs, the low rumble of something large moving nearby. Without fire, you don't have a protective ring of light to push predators back. So every shadow feels like it might pounce. Sleep doesn't come easy when you know you're on somebody else's menu. Your first threat: big cats. Saber-toothed cats, lions, leopards depending on where you are. The night is prowled by sharp-eyed hunters. They see better in the dark than you ever could. Their padded feet barely whisper against the ground, and you wouldn't notice them until their breath is already on your neck. You know that old saying about sleeping with one eye open? That's not a metaphor here, that's literally the strategy. Historians agree that many early human groups adapted by sleeping in shifts. Half of you drift off, while the others keep watch. It's not peaceful, but it means fewer midnight ambushes. Still, here's the quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest humans developed lighter sleep phases because of this exact danger. Basically, we never fully let ourselves go unconscious, even today. That restless AM wake-up you hate? Blame your ancestors, who are hardwired to jolt awake at the sound of a snapping branch. But cats weren't the only threat. Hyenas laughed in the distance, their eerie cackles drifting on the wind. Wolves stalked in packs, testing boundaries. Even snakes slithered silently, curling near sleeping bodies for warmth. And let's not forget the giant bears, especially in colder climates. Imagine rolling over in your sleep and realizing you're nose to nose with half a ton of fur and claws. Sweet dreams, right? Now, here's where it gets even stranger. Without fire, you don't just fear predators, you start to fear the dark itself. Your imagination fills the void. Is that rustling in the bushes just the wind, or something with teeth? Historians still argue whether fear of the dark was purely survival-based, or whether humans already layered it with superstition, imagining spirits or monsters lurking beyond sight. Either way, the result was the same. Your heartbeat quickened, your body flooded with adrenaline, and sleep slipped further away. And yet, somehow, you managed to adapt. One clever trick: sleeping higher up. Trees became makeshift bunk beds. You'd climb into sturdy branches, wedge yourself between limbs, and try to snooze while dangling above the ground. Not exactly a Sealy Posturepedic, but it worked. Of course, the quirky risk: rolling out of bed meant a nasty fall. It was a gamble, risk a broken bone, or risk becoming dinner. Think about it. Today you complain if a mosquito buzzes in your room. Back then, your bedtime playlist was growls, snarls, and the occasional scream from something unlucky nearby. It wasn't white noise, it was a reminder that nature didn't care about your comfort. Still, in a twisted way, it sharpened you. That constant threat meant your senses stayed honed. You heard better, smelled better, even dreamed in fragments tuned toward survival. Some researchers suggest nightmares themselves may have evolved as practice scenarios. Your brain rehearsing danger while you slept, just in case. That creepy chase dream you had last week? Congratulations, it's prehistoric training software. So there you are, eyes half shut, muscles tense, body curled tight, trying to rest while predators circle. Your ancestors survived not because they slept soundly, but because they never really did. Sleep was never about comfort, it was about making it to morning alive. The night presses down on you, heavier than any blanket. You close your eyes, but your body refuses to fully surrender. Instead of drifting into long, luxurious rest, you slip into fragments, short bursts of sleep, broken by sudden jolts awake. Your ancestors didn't enjoy the steady 8 hours you dream of today. They lived by what scientists call a segmented sleep cycle, and it wasn't by choice. Picture this: you nod off for a couple of hours, curled against cold stone or nestled in a crude shelter, then snap awake when your brain screams, check for danger. You rub your eyes, listen to the night, maybe shift positions or even get up to walk the perimeter, only after convincing yourself that the silence is safe. Again, do you fall back into another shallow stretch of slumber? 2 hours here, 2 hours there, that was the rhythm of survival. Historians believe this fragmented sleep wasn't just about predators, though. Without artificial light, your body naturally synced to the sun and moon. Darkness stretched so long that it carved the night into two distinct blocks: first sleep and second sleep, with a wakeful window in between. Some argue that during this midnight pause, people whispered stories, tended wounds, or even just sat quietly, staring into the dark. It wasn't rest as you know it. It was life woven into the silence. Now here's the quirky twist. Some modern experiments show that when people live without electricity, they naturally fall back into this to-sleep pattern. Imagine it: you go to bed early, wake up around midnight wide-eyed, maybe journal or pace for an hour, then slide into your second stretch of rest. Turns out your body still carries echoes of that ancient rhythm. Your late-night insomnia? Maybe it's just a prehistoric throwback. But here's the rub. These short bursts of rest weren't enough for real recovery. Your muscles stayed sore, your mind foggy. Without fire, you never reached the deep, healing stages of sleep as often. Instead, you hovered on the surface, half aware, half dreaming, always alert. That's why, even today, humans are wired with a startle reflex. You know the feeling when you're just dozing off and suddenly jerk awake as if falling. Thank your ancestors who had to leap at the faintest snap of a twig. Historians still argue whether this segmented cycle made humans weaker or simply more adaptable. On one hand, broken rest left bodies exhausted. On the other hand, lighter sleep may have kept people alive, able to respond instantly to threats. Survival didn't care about how refreshed you felt in the morning. It cared about whether you made it to the morning at all. And yet, there's something strangely human about this fragile pattern. Even in fractured slumber, you dreamed. Not long, winding epics like you might today, but flashes, faces, shapes, half-formed visions sparked by exhaustion and fear. You drift off imagining warmth, maybe even light, only to wake again to the same unbroken dark. Here's your cheeky modern comparison. You grumble when your neighbor's car alarm wakes you at a.m. Back then. The car alarm was a hyena sniffing at your shelter. And trust me, snooze button wasn't an option. So you doze, wake, doze again. The night stretches endlessly, carved into fragments that barely count as rest. Still, somehow, it's enough to keep your body moving, your brain sparking, your will to survive intact. You don't sleep deeply, but you sleep just enough to see the dawn. You blink your eyes in the dark, the kind of half-sleep where reality and imagination blur. Without fire, your nights are not just cold and restless there, filled with shadows that move in ways your mind can't quite explain. You've probably noticed this yourself in modern times, when the lights go out. Even in your own bedroom, your brain begins to paint shapes in the darkness. Now, strip away electricity, comfort, and safety, and multiply that by 1,000. That's the stage on which your ancestors dreamed. Dreams were not a luxury here. They were an escape, a rehearsal, and sometimes a torment. You drift into shallow slumber, and images rise, faces of people long gone, or strange beasts stitched together from memory and fear. Your brain, starved of stimulation without firelight, fills the void with its own flickering cinema. Historians believe that without visual stimulation at night, early humans leaned more heavily on imagination. Night after night, the mind grew wild in the dark, and dreams became richer, stranger, more vivid. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists suggest that myths and gods may have first emerged out of these dreamscapes. Imagine you wake, heart pounding, after seeing a glowing figure or a monstrous shadow in your sleep. You don't have science textbooks to explain it, you just know it felt real. When you whisper the vision to your group, they nod, wide-eyed, maybe having seen something similar themselves. Bit by bit, dream fragments became sacred stories. In a sense, darkness and sleeplessness may have birthed religion itself. Meanwhile, neuroscientists today debate whether dreams served as a survival tool. One theory claims they were mental simulations, preparing you for threats you couldn't practice in daylight. You dream of being chased, so you're quicker to react when something rustles the grass. Others argue dreams were simply side effects of a brain sorting memories and emotions. Historians still argue whether dreams were sacred messages or just scrambled neurons, but either way, your ancestors took them seriously. Picture it. The group huddled in silence, some awake, some half asleep. One person stirs suddenly, gasping, muttering about a shadow with glowing eyes. The others listen, shivering, wondering if it was just imagination or a warning. In a world without light, dreams and reality bled together, and nobody could be sure which was which. And here's a little modern joke for you. Today, if you dream about teeth falling out, you Google it and convince yourself you're stressed. Back then, if you dreamed of teeth falling out, you probably thought a spirit was stealing your strength. Same anxiety, different era. Without fire, the night wasn't just physical darkness. It was a stage for the mind. Your brain projected its deepest fears, but also its wildest creativity. Some of the first sparks of human imagination likely came from these dark hours, when the only flickering images were the ones behind closed eyes. In a strange way, sleepless nights without fire might have helped build the foundation for art, story, and belief. So you drift, jolt awake, drift again. Each dream feels more alive than the last, each shadow more convincing. The line between night terror and bedtime vision blurs until dawn. And in that fragile space, your imagination begins to change the world. Your eyelids are heavy, but sleep refuses to stay. Every time you begin to sink into that fragile darkness, the cold creeps in again, biting your skin, rattling your bones. Without fire, warmth is the most precious thing you don't have. It's not just about comfort, it's about survival. At night, temperatures plummet, even in regions you'd call warm by day. The sun dips, the wind rises, and suddenly, your body is shivering so hard that even closing your eyes feels impossible. You pull yourself tighter, curling into a ball. This instinct, what scientists call the fetal position, isn't random. It's your body's way of reducing surface area, holding on to what little heat you've got. Sometimes it's not enough. Your skin numbs, your muscles ache, and you start to understand how fragile humans really are. Without fur, without feathers, without flame, you're just a soft creature trapped in the dark. And so you adapt. Your group huddles close together, shoulder to shoulder, chest to back. Imagine half a dozen bodies pressed tight, forming a living blanket. It's not glamorous sweat, breath, and the occasional elbow in your ribs, but it's survival. You breathe in the warmth of others, and little by little, the trembling eases. Modern researchers call this social thermoregulation. But your ancestors would have called it common sense. Freeze alone or survive together. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some historians believe this nightly. Huddling shaped human bonding. Sharing warmth wasn't just physical, it forged trust, connection, even affection. Think about it. When the only thing keeping you alive is the person next to you, you're going to care a little more whether they make it through the night. Maybe that's why, even today, cuddling still feels comforting, hardwired deep in our survival instincts. But not all cold could be conquered. In harsher climates, winter nights dragged long and merciless. Without fire, some people may have relied on animal skins, layering them for insulation. Archaeological evidence shows early humans sewing crude coverings from hides as far back as 30,000 years ago. Still, fireless nights meant shivering was your constant companion. Historians still argue whether clothing was enough, or if many groups simply endured half-frozen nights until morning. And the cold didn't just steal comfort, it stole sleep itself. Your body shakes so violently at times that drifting off becomes impossible. Imagine lying there, eyes burning with exhaustion, while your muscles twitch uncontrollably. You long for warmth, for stillness. But instead, you ride the tremors until dawn's light finally arrives. Now, here's your cheeky modern comparison. You complain when your blanket slips off in the middle of the night, and you wake up chilly. Back then, there were no blankets, just the choice between shivering alone or smelling your neighbor's armpit until sunrise. Still, through the cold and discomfort, your ancestors endured. The act of huddling, of sharing body heat, became not just a survival strategy, but a nightly ritual. And in that closeness, in those shivering nights, something more than warmth was created. Community. The cold may have kept you awake, but it also kept you together. The night stretches on, and while the cold bites, another danger slithers quietly into your sleep, or rather, keeps you from it. Without fire, the darkness isn't just empty space. It's alive with things that crawl, buzz, and sting. Imagine lying flat on the ground, eyelids heavy, when suddenly you feel the tickle of legs on your skin. No fire means no barrier, no smoke to drive pests away, no light to spot what's creeping toward you. Mosquitoes, gnats, fleas, all of them love the warmth of human skin. You swat at them, half asleep, only to feel another bite moments later. And unlike today, where you can shrug off a mosquito as a nuisance, these little invaders carried real threats: disease, infection, weakness. Each bite wasn't just annoying, it could spell disaster. Historians believe insect-borne sicknesses shaped entire migrations, pushing groups to abandon some areas and settle in others. Without fire to deter bugs, you're basically a buffet with no closing hours. But insects weren't the only nightly intruders. Small predators, drawn to the scent of sweat and discarded food scraps, sometimes prowled into camps. Imagine the scratch of claws against rock, or the sudden glint of eyes just beyond the edge of your vision. A raccoon-sized predator today might raid your trash. Back then, its ancient cousins had sharper teeth, fewer reasons to fear you, and the darkness on their side. Here's a quirky tidbit. In some parts of the world, people smeared themselves with mud or plant juices to mask human scent, hoping predators and insects would pass them by. Think of it as the world's earliest bug spray, messy, smelly, and only half effective. Still, it was better than lying exposed, waiting for something to find you. And yet, even with these risks, your ancestors still had to rest. Some may have chosen elevated spots, tree branches, cliff edges, or raised platforms of sticks to avoid crawling pests and ground predators. But this came with its own risk. Roll the wrong way in your sleep, and you'd wake up mid-fall. Historians still argue whether tree sleeping was widespread or just a desperate adaptation in certain regions. Either way, every night carried the same gamble: risk the ground or risk the fall. Here's your cheeky, Modern parallel. You toss and turn. When there's a fly buzzing in your bedroom. Back then, that buzzing wasn't just annoying. It was a warning that you might not wake up healthy tomorrow. So your nights became a constant battle. Swat, scratch, listen, twitch. Your body never fully relaxed, even when you managed a stretch of shallow sleep. Every tickle or rustle snapped you awake, heart pounding, eyes wide. Night after night, your body learned to expect the interruption. And in that constant tension, something remarkable happened. Your senses sharpened. Humans who survived without fire became light sleepers, tuned to wake at the slightest noise. It wasn't restful, but it was evolution's way of saying, better tired than dead. The darkness wasn't just silence and stillness. It was alive, crawling, buzzing, hunting. And without fire, you are never truly alone in it. You lie there, restless, and soon you realize something strange. The night doesn't pass in one smooth stretch of sleep. Without fire, without the steady glow to trick your body into thinking bedtime is one long block. Your nights fracture into pieces. You drift off for a few hours. Wake in the dead of darkness, sit quietly or pace, and then sink back into slumber before dawn. This pattern, called segmented sleep, was likely the natural rhythm of your ancestors. In those long, fireless nights, the middle hours weren't wasted. You sit awake, body wrapped in animal hide, or pressed close to your group, while the stars blaze overhead. Some nights, you hum softly or rock back and forth. Other nights, you whisper to whoever else is awake. It's not insomnia, it's a different way of resting. You sleep into chunks with a quiet, reflective period in between. Historians still argue whether this was healthier than modern sleep, but many agree it gave humans time for thought, conversation, even intimacy. Here's a quirky tidbit. Medieval records thousands of years after fire's discovery still mention a first sleep and a second sleep. People prayed, journaled, or even visited neighbors in the middle of the night. Imagine that, instead of doom scrolling on your phone at a.m., you'd stroll across a village in the pitch dark for a chat, without electricity or firelight. Night wasn't empty, it was divided in two parts, each with its own rhythm. And there's a survival twist to this broken sleep. Waking in the night meant keeping watch, noticing sounds, adjusting to danger. A group that slept in shifts, or stirred in the middle hours, was harder for predators to surprise. Your ancestors weren't tossing and turning for no reason. Their fragmented rest may have been evolution's compromise between exhaustion and safety. Think about how different that feels from today's world. You're told 8 hours straight is the gold standard, but back then, your body naturally synced with the deep dark and the faint pre-dawn light. Maybe that's why modern insomniacs often wake around 2 or 3 a.m. Ghost of an ancient rhythm still ticking inside. And here's your cheeky modern joke. You wake up at a.m. and panic about your job, your bills, your ex's Instagram stories. Your ancestors woke up at a.m. and panicked about wolves. Honestly, the wolves might have been less stressful. So the night stretches not as one continuous stream, but as a woven fabric. Sleep, wake, reflect, and then sleep again. Without fire, you learned to live in those pauses, to find a strange kind of peace in the middle of the darkness. And while you may never call it restful, it was a rhythm that carried humans through countless generations of fireless nights. Your body craves warmth, your mind craves safety. But there's another hunger that keeps nudging. You awake through the night. Food. Without fire, your meals are raw, rough, and often hard to digest. You chew tough roots until your jaw aches. You gnaw on strips of sinewy meat, and you swallow bitter berries with a grimace. Sleep doesn't come easy on a stomach that's working overtime. The truth is, fire isn't just warmth, it's transformation. With it, food softens, toxins break down, flavors emerge. Without it, your nights are haunted by indigestion and hunger pangs. You curl on your side, stomach gurgling, wondering whether those berries were truly safe, or if you'll be sprinting to the bushes before sunrise. Historians still argue whether raw diets kept early humans lean and fast, or simply left them exhausted and nutrient-starved. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some anthropologists suggest that chewing itself shaped human evolution. Before fire, you spent hours each day grinding fibrous plants and raw meat between your teeth. That constant chewing required bigger jaws and stronger teeth than we have now. Only after fire softened food did our skulls begin reshaping into what you see in the mirror today. In a way, your aching jaw under the moonlight was sculpting the face of the future. But the lack of fire also meant fewer options. You avoided many plants because they were too tough or toxic raw. Tubers that modern you would roast into golden fries? Back then, they were starchy rocks. Meat from large animals often spoiled quickly without cooking, and gnawing cold flesh carried risks of parasites. You were always balancing hunger against danger, nibbling just enough to get by. Imagine it. You're lying awake, belly aching, while across the world, someone else in the same era might have had a small fire, roasting meat, eating better, sleeping deeper. That gap between the fed and the hungry, the warm and the cold, may have decided which groups thrived and which slowly vanished. And here's your cheeky modern comparison. You complain when the microwave breaks and you're stuck with cold pizza. Your ancestors would have killed for cold pizza. Cold anything was a feast compared to the raw roots they were choking down. So sleep became a luxury you earned only after you managed to fill your stomach. If you could. Every gurgle, every sharp cramp reminded you of how fragile the line was between resting and starving. Without fire, even the act of closing your eyes at night was tied to the raw, relentless grind of survival. As the long, fireless night drags on, you realize sleep isn't just about warmth or hunger. It's also about company. Humans are social creatures, and in the dark, your survival depends not only on your senses, but on the bodies huddled beside you. Without fire to anchor the group, there's no glowing hearth where everyone gathers. Instead, you press close in clusters, sharing body heat, breaths mingling in the cold night air. There's comfort in this closeness, but also tension. Someone snores. Someone twitches. Someone hogs the best furs or the driest patch of ground. Sleep is shallow not only because of predators, but because you're wedged, shoulder to shoulder with people who are both your safety, net and your nightly irritation. Historians still argue whether these sleeping clusters fostered tighter bonds or fueled conflicts that flared when dawn came. And yet, this shared vulnerability shaped humanity. Without fire to push back the dark, you relied on each other. One person woke at a sound, the whole group stirred. If a child whimpered, everyone shushed it, knowing predators were listening too. Sleep wasn't individual, it was communal. An overlapping rhythm of drifting and waking that kept the group alive. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some researchers suggest that this group's sleeping pattern may explain why, even today, many people struggle to sleep deeply when alone. Your brain still whispers, "Where's the tribe? Where's the safety net?" That empty silence feels wrong, because for most of history, sleeping alone wasn't brave, it was reckless. And here's your cheeky modern joke. You complain when your partner steals the blanket. Your ancestor would have been grateful just to have someone warm enough to steal it from. But the lack of fire also meant there was no central gathering point to tell stories or reinforce group identity at night. Those bonding rituals, the tales, the songs, the laughter likely came later, once fire gave people light to linger by. Before that, your story time was whispered in darkness, short and cautious, words swallowed quickly so as not to attract attention. In some ways, the absence of fire meant fewer shared myths, fewer sparks of creativity. You survived together, yes, but your nights were more about endurance than expression. Still, every rustle, every breath, every small adjustment of the people lying next to you reminded you that you weren't alone. The night was hostile, but together you built a fragile bubble of safety, thin, uncomfortable, but enough to carry you to morning. Your eyes flutter open, and for a moment you wonder if you're dreaming. There it is, a flicker in the darkness, a sharp orange tongue licking the night air. The first spark of fire doesn't come from your hands, it comes from the sky. Lightning crashes into a dry tree, and suddenly the night is split by flames. You and your group freeze, wide-eyed, torn between terror and awe. Up until this moment, fire has been a predator's weapon. You've seen forests burn, animals scatter, smoke choke the air. You felt heat on your skin as you fled. Fire was chaos, something to avoid. But now, instead of running, you inch closer. The warmth touches your frozen fingers. The light pushes back the blackness. For the first time, night is no longer infinite shadow. Historians still argue whether early humans first captured fire from natural sources or created it themselves with tools. Some say it was borrowed, kept alive from lightning strikes, volcanic activity, or wildfires. Others suggest humans may have learned to spark flames earlier than we think. But either way, in this moment, the discovery feels miraculous. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes even into modern times carried embers from place to place, like precious treasure. Instead of kindling a fresh flame, they nursed the same fire for days, weeks, sometimes generations. Fire wasn't just light, it was lineage. And now, as you stand by that first captured blaze, your body responds in ways you don't fully understand. The heat melts the tension in your muscles. The shadows retreat. Predators hesitate at the edge of the glow. For the first time in countless generations, you close your eyes not in fear, but in something close to comfort. Of course, not everyone in your group feels safe. Some hover nervously, ready to bolt if the flames are too high. Some whisper that this brightness is dangerous, that it will summon spirits or rival tribes. And honestly, they're not wrong. Fire is both salvation and a beacon. It offers safety, but it announces your presence across the landscape like a flare. Here's your cheeky modern comparison. You remember the first time you turned on a smartphone flashlight in the dark? That little glow felt powerful. Now imagine that times 1,000. And instead of finding your dropped keys, you're fighting for your species' survival. So the night has changed forever. You're no longer just prey huddled in the dark. With fire in your grasp, you've stepped into a new chapter, one where warmth, light, and safety begin to reshape not only your sleep, but your entire existence. The fire is yours now. Not a stolen spark from the heavens. Not a wild blaze devouring a forest, but a flame you feed, tend, and protect. It's fragile. Just a few glowing embers coaxed back to life, with careful breaths and dry twigs. Yet it feels like a revolution burning in the palm of your hand. For the first time, you stretch out at night without shivering. The ground still presses hard against your back, but your body unwinds as the warmth seeps into your bones. Sleep no longer comes in panicked fragments. Instead, you sink into something deeper, more luxurious, a full cycle of rest that leaves you clearer, sharper and hungrier for more than survival. Historians still argue whether fire directly rewired human sleep, or if it simply allowed safer conditions for the brain to evolve differently. What's clear is that better rest led to better thinking. You wake more alert. You plan instead of reacting. You start to imagine not just the next meal, but the next hunt, the next tool, the next journey beyond the ridge. Here's a quirky tidbit. Neuroscientists suggest that REM sleep, the stage when dreams bloom most vividly, may have become more common once humans could rest longer in safety. That means the very first campfires may have sparked not just warmth, but imagination itself. Dreaming worlds into being began with embers glowing against the night. And of course, fire reshapes your nights in other ways too. Predators keep their distance. Bugs hesitate at the heat. Even the shadows look softer, less oppressive. The constant, gnawing tension that once woke you a dozen times a night starts to loosen its grip. You begin to dream of more than survival. You dream of possibility. Here's your cheeky modern joke. You get cranky if you don't hit your 8 hours. Your ancestors thought 4 hours in a row, without worrying about being eaten, was the height of luxury. Fire turned cranky zombies into something closer to human thinkers. But with every gift fire gives, it also whispers a warning. Protect me. The embers must be kept alive. The flames must not spread too far. One mistake, and your life-giving tool becomes a life-taking disaster. Sleep is deeper now. Yes, but always near someone watching, someone tending, someone keeping the miracle alive through the long hours. Still, compared to those endless nights of trembling in the dark, this is paradise. Fire doesn't just reshape the night, it reshapes you. The fire has burned long enough now that it's no longer a novelty, it's a way of life. With its steady glow, your nights transform into something they never were before. Time not just for sleeping, but for living. You gather around the flames with your group. Shadows dance across faces, and suddenly there's a stage for expression. Voices rise, stories spill out, and myths are born. That jagged scar on someone's arm becomes a heroic tale. The stars overhead transform into gods and animals. Around fire, imagination flourishes, and with it, culture. Historians still argue whether storytelling truly began with fire or earlier, whispered in the dark. But most agree that fire extended the day, carving out precious hours where minds could wander beyond survival. Before fire, night was short, anxious, and broken. After fire, night became a canvas for art, laughter, planning, and yes, dreaming. Here's a quirky tidbit. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer societies found that people around the fire often talked about things beyond the practical, not hunting tactics or food storage, but ancestors, spirits, and possibilities. In other words, fire didn't just warm your body, it warmed your imagination. And let's not forget sleep. Fire's glow calmed your fears, but it also disrupted your rhythms. The flicker of light may have altered melatonin cycles, nudging your brain into new patterns of wakefulness and rest. Some scientists think this shift helped stretch human attention spans, encouraging deeper problem solving and memory. Basically, the campfire was your ancestors' version of a double espresso stimulating, a little addictive, and sometimes keeping you up later than you planned. Here's your cheeky modern joke. You binge watch. Netflix at AM, they binge-watched sparks fly off logs. And honestly, it was just as captivating. But the most profound change wasn't the warmth or even the sleep. It was the sense of community. Fire turned scattered individuals into tribes, bound not just by survival, but by stories and shared identity. Around those flames, laughter replaced fear. Songs rose into the night, and a new kind of human emerged. The kind that didn't just endure the darkness, but began to own it. The fire wasn't just light. It was the beginning of civilization. The fire crackles, a steady heartbeat in the night, and you realize you've crossed an invisible threshold. Before fire, you were a creature of shadows huddled, cautious. Your nights ruled by fear and fragmented rest. Now the glow stretches your hours, reshapes your sleep, and whispers a dangerous new idea into your mind. You can control the night. You sleep longer, deeper, safer. The constant panic that once jolted you awake eases, replaced with a soft hum of dreams. Fire pushes predators back and lets your brain wander further than instinct alone. You wake refreshed, your thoughts sharper, your plans bigger. Historians still argue whether it was fire that triggered the leap toward modern humanity, or whether it was already brewing in your bones. But standing here, warmed by the flames, you feel like something has shifted. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some scientists think fires, smoke may even have helped keep insects away, reducing disease. Imagine that your nightly bonfire doubling as the world's first bug spray. And yes, fire comes with its own hazards. Too little attention, and the embers die, plunging you back into fear. Too much, and your shelter or your whole forest erupts in disaster. Someone always has to keep watch, poking the coals, guarding the miracle. Your sleep is richer, but it's also more structured. Night now has duties as well as dreams. Here's your cheeky modern joke. You complain when your smoke alarm chirps at AM. Your ancestors' smoke alarm was an actual roaring blaze threatening to swallow their cave. Perspective, right? But the trade-off is undeniable. Fire rewrites not just your nights, but your destiny. It's no longer about merely surviving until dawn. It's about shaping the future. Around this fire, you tell stories, dream bigger, and rest deeper. And in the morning, with energy renewed, you don't just endure the world. You begin to change it. And now, as the fire burns low, it's time for us to drift too. Picture the embers glowing softly, their light shrinking to a warm pulse against the night. The air is cooler now, but not unfriendly. You're wrapped in the comfort of knowing the dark has been tamed, at least for tonight. Your body feels heavier, the kind of weight that only comes when your mind finally believes it's safe. The shadows that once threatened have softened into gentle outlines, familiar and calm. You hear the quiet crackle of wood, a rhythm as soothing as a lullaby, steady and grounding. Your thoughts slow. Instead of racing through dangers or worries, they settle on simpler images. The glow of light against stone, the sound of a friend's breathing beside you, the warmth of fire that asks for nothing more than care. You exhale, and it feels like releasing centuries of tension. Even now, thousands of years later, some part of you remembers this moment. The comfort of safety, the warmth of connection, the luxury of rest. Your body still carries that ancient memory, the promise that night can be gentle, that darkness can hold peace. So let your eyes close, let your breath deepen, and let the fire inside your imagination burn steady as you drift. Sleep, after all, is humanity's oldest gift. Good night, dreamer.